I'm really honored to be here with you all. David, my buddy from Moved Down Violence, and honestly, as I was thinking about giving this speech, I was thinking about what it would feel like to be in a room surrounded by hundreds of people who have committed their lives to end sexual violence. And it felt like a moment for me to say publicly, thank you. Thank you for everything that you do to help survivors. I really wanted to say thank you. It felt like this is the first time I'm publicly having an opportunity to say thank you to folks who have given their life to addressing sexual violence. And it's a personal thank you because of folks like you, I had what I needed to heal. I was thinking back about it and thinking about the role that group therapy played for me, and it helped me to really know that I wasn't alone and to push back against so much of the victim blaming that happens in this culture to the extent that I was internalizing it myself. And so the importance of being in community, of seeing others' humanity, and to then have some grace for myself in that moment, the services like that were invaluable. The other thing that was really critical for me in my own healing and my sort of road to not only surviving but thriving was around political education, because it offered me a way to make sense of what had happened. It gave me a sense to see what I could do about it. I can vividly remember sitting in a cold, sterile, cinder block classroom, feeling all hollowed out and like just a shadow of myself. I'm watching the professor click through slides of how the media objectifies women. And with each click of the projector, I'm dating myself, but with each click of the projector, it was like my brain was clicking, and I could suddenly realize that what happened to me, what sexual violence is a systemic issue, right? And once I could see that is a direct consequence of a world that values domination and exploitation and extraction, as well as a terrible means of enforcing it. And that was really the beginning of my own political awakening, my understanding of how the world works. And it offered me a way to feel powerful again. And for the survivors in the room, you know that fact battle, right? Because once we begin to see how the world we're living in is totally socially constructed, I could imagine constructing something else. And that set me off on my life's journey as an architect of social change. So I'm truly delighted to be here with you all today to talk about how we as a field that is so committed to addressing sexual violence can stand fully in our power, collectively, as a movement for social change. And we have just a few minutes this morning, so I'm going to try to keep it simple, and we're going to figure out what is going on here and what are we going to do about it. Okay, what's going on here? My first job out of law school, I was a legal aid lawyer on the west side of Chicago. And so as a result, my clients were all extremely low income, all African American, almost all mothers. The majority had suffered some form of domestic or sexual violence. They lived in neighborhoods with terrible schools, low paying jobs, limited access to healthy food. When they found it was criminally expensive, poor housing, and no banks, just those kind of payday loan check cashing places on the corner. And I'll never forget a mom who I worked with at the end of my time there. She had a low-wage job across town, which was constantly in jeopardy because as a single mom with no car, who was relying on the bus schedule and unreliable childcare, that was tough, right? And between rent and bus fare and trying to keep her kids fed, she was living paycheck to paycheck. And she was in a constant state of exhaustion and anxiety, both providing for her kids and keeping them safe. One day, the apartment building became infested with bed bugs, and her kids had bites from head to toe. And she went to the apartment manager and asked him to do something about it. And he called her a troublemaker and threatened to evict her for failure to pay rent. Of course, she had been paying rent this whole time, but because there were no banks, she was going to the cash place on the corner, and she was paying him in cash. And so she was desperate not to be evicted. She had no money for another down payment, and she did not want her children out on the street. So she didn't say anything the first time he raped her, or the second. She didn't come for help until he wanted her daughter instead of her. And I think about that mom all the time, especially now that I'm a mom and that means something really different to me. Whew. I know the assistance that I offered her in that moment was extremely valuable, but I also know that we just treated the symptom of the problem. We did nothing to address the underlying conditions and systemic issues that kept her trapped in poverty and made her vulnerable to that abuse.
It wasn't until I moved to DC that I was able to step back and fully make sense of what was going on, to develop a frame or analysis for how things worked. So here's what I think. Our society is constructed by those with power, and they are privileged, mostly white, mostly men. And they craft systems and shape beliefs to conform to their worldview. And that worldview is based on pull yourselves up by your bootstraps brand of American individualism that insists you make it on your own and blames and punishes you if you don't. Oh, I'm crying. I'm just nodding all over the place. I'm going to ruin the video. So sorry. And it conveniently obscures all the supports that give those with privilege a head start and a leg up. This is the worldview around which our society is currently organized. We are raised to believe that the individual is both the source of the problem and the source of the solution. And we are trained since childhood not to see all the systemic forces at play. They are so pervasive, so much the waters that we are swimming in, as my friend Monica Ten says, that it can be hard to see them at all. It makes the way that things are seem natural and inevitable. This is the worldview that makes it possible for people in power to look at the problem of poverty in America, see that the majority of those impacted are women and their children, and define the problem as single motherhood. Because to them, the problem is not the near total absence of systems that would allow single mothers and their children to thrive, things like equal pay and living wage and paid leave and paid sick days and affordable childcare. The problem is that single mothers are exposing the burden we place on individual families and showing that it's virtually impossible to do this alone. This worldview rests on a set of core values, things like greed and domination and exploitation and extraction and competition and fear and control. These are the values that are used to divide us and pit us against each other. They create the conditions for abuse of power, and they are the foundation upon which a rape culture sits. These values shape our society's dominant beliefs, because like laws and policies, beliefs are powerful levers of social control. We saw this in the welfare context, when to win public support for the law, those in power created myths about the welfare queen and told stories about lazy black women who bear children solely for the purpose of exploiting the system and for defrauding legitimate taxpayers. They stoke the deep-seated racism and sexism in America that has justified the rape of black women and the denigration of black motherhood since slavery. And once we as a public had that mother in mind, we were only too happy to pass a law that blames single mothers for poverty in America, that punished them for having or raising kids outside of marriage, that forced them out of higher education and into low-paying jobs that supply cheap labor. And we promoted marriage to keep the solution at the individual and family level rather than at a systemic one. There was nothing natural or inevitable or accidental about the conditions my client was navigating when she was raped. This was a man-made disaster. Folks in power had a particular worldview, shored up by a core set of values. They used those values to shape beliefs and to justify the systems and structures they put in place, or they didn't, which only served to reinforce their beliefs, and that led to totally predictable outcomes. But here's the good news. Another world is possible. Just as surely as those systems and beliefs were constructed by people with power to make society fit their worldview, they can be replaced by us to make society fit our worldview. What we need is what Dr. King called a radical revolution in values. And that revolution is well underway. We are in the values war in our country right now. You see it playing out at every political rally and in every major social issue of our time. One set of people are fighting tooth and nail to defend the prevailing worldview and hold tight to dominant values. Another set of people are fighting for an alternate worldview, one that is organized around the notion that we are all interconnected and that we need to value and cherish each other. These folks are calling up a core set of values that exist within us right now. Things like love and care and mutuality and community. They're calling on us to choose to prioritize these values and to reorganize our society around them. This revolution is happening right now, and those defending the status quo are feeling really threatened. And we're going to see an escalation of violence as they try to regain control and exert their dominance. The threat that a female president candidate poses cannot be overstated to this worldview. we will see a vicious backlash running throughout society. And we are already seeing it. So the question is, in the face of all of this, what are we going to do about it? First, we need to get clear about the world we want. We need to imagine the world as we want it to be. I can't overstate this enough. It can be so tempting when we do social change work to try to think about the world as it is now and think about how we can make it better. But that is a genuinely dangerous road because it keeps us working within a system that is organized around values and beliefs that were not constructed for us to thrive. At best, that will lead to incremental change, not the transformational change we seek. It's much better to imagine the world we want and then develop a strategy to get there. I'm a strategist, so I'm not talking pie in the sky. I'm talking know what you want. I also learned this in therapy. Know what you want and ask for it, and then make a plan to get it. At Moved on Violence, the world we want is one in which that is rooted in interdependence and interconnection. It recognizes that we are all in this together and that our fates are intertwined. To construct such a world, we need to base it in a core set of values. Things like love and care and mutuality and community and regeneration. Those values will drive the vision of the world we want and inform how we need to be if we ever hope to get there. From there, we can envision what the world will look like. What will it look like when our culture and beliefs embody these values, when the systems and structures we create manifest them? Let me give you some examples. My little boy just graduated kindergarten, and the motto at his school is care for self, care for others, care for place. What would it look like if the entire education system was centered around that value of care? What kind of boys would we be raising then? What if caregiving was actually valued throughout society? How would our systems need to change? This one, we don't actually have to stretch our imaginations very far because every other industrialized country in the world is doing better than us at this. They have made a choice to value care, and so they're doing it. This one is that's not hard, right? It's so possible everyone else is doing it. But in our country, we say, no, handle it yourself, handle it yourself. What would a justice system look like that understood its job as promoting accountability, healing, repair, regeneration? How would it be different then? How would we deal with harm and harm doers according to our values? If we can imagine the world as it could be if it were organized this way, we can begin to build the power to fundamentally transform our society. Is this hard? Maybe. We've all been living so long in a society defined by someone else's worldview that it's hard to even recognize it, much less imagine a different world. But if we can help each other to do it, we can start to construct that world by tapping into the positive values that exist today and intentionally cultivating a culture and a belief system around those values, which will support the transformation of laws and values. Is it impossible? Absolutely not. Look at the LGBT movement and marriage equality. Those folks were able to imagine the world they wanted, one that was inconceivable 30 years ago, right? And initially they started out with an individual rights-based approach, and that was not working for them. But when they switched to focusing on the value of love, and they worked to nurture and cultivate that value, neighbor to neighbor, community by community, across the U.S., they shifted beliefs, which allowed us to change law and policy. So it's happening. We can do this. It's possible. But if we want to transform society, the transformation starts with us. I try to think of a way to say this that doesn't end up sounding cheesy and it's just not possible. So there's a reason why Rocky said you have to be the change you want to see in the world. Because it's true. We have to embody the values we want in the new society if we want to build it. There is no way to build a world constructed around love and care if we're operating in a place of hate and anger. Right? It just is not possible. So the transformation has to start with us. And that means we have to ask ourselves, where are we behaving in ways that are rooted in the values of this dominant culture? It is in all of us. It's in the field, it's in the work, it's in the choices we make, and the way we are together. As folks committed to social justice and as survivors, this might be hard for us to acknowledge the ways in which we are embodying these dominant values, and in some of the ways in which we ourselves are the harm doers. In my own practice around this, I have run the gamut. Denial, defensiveness, shame, disbelief, justification, embarrassment, back again. So I'm not going to suggest that the path of this kind of transformation is easy, but I will say to you that it is the path of our own liberation. It is the way that I am freeing myself of the ways that dominant culture is restricting me from being who I truly am and who I want to be in the world. And so it is worth it. This way lies freedom for everyone. How are the dominant values showing up in how we are with each other? Think about how much time in our work we spend in competition with each other, the scarcity mindset we have, the way we believe that for me to win, you have to lose, that there's a set pie. That is not true. It is not how other people operate. We are so attached to the symptoms of the problem that we stay isolated and fragmented and apart from each other. And how often are we the ones that are keeping the focus on the individual level rather than looking at the system? So there's lots of questions we could be asking ourselves about how we need to be different if we want to make the world different. And I just love the work that CALCASA and CPEDD are doing together. I think it's inspiring and really a model for the country. Part of what I said yesterday, I was like, yes. So how are these values showing up in what we choose to work on and how? What we place at the center is what we value. This is true in every part of life, and it's true in our work. If we truly believe that we're interconnected, that we rise and fall together, our work needs to center the most marginalized. Because what we know from decades of experience doing this work is that doing anything else but centering the most marginalized will not work. When you listen to my client's story, you can see that the sexual violence she experienced wasn't operating in isolation from the violence of poverty and structural racism. Those are also forms of violence against women, and they are gendered in this country, and they are inextricable. They wrap around each other like weeds, and it simply doesn't work for us to try to pull out the one that we know best. We need to go after the roots together. All of these forms of violence are perpetuated by values of domination, exploitation, extraction, and control. When we center the most marginalized, her students, and her leadership, we see both a great challenge and a great possibility for the field. The challenge is, how do we, as a professional service providing field, restructure our relationships with survivors to engage them as fellow agents of social change in a way that honors their wisdom and their leadership? It is not exploitative or extractive. It isn't mine for the stories that best advance our predetermined goals. One of the most rewarding experiences of my career to date has been the work I did with Senator Wellstone and Representative Meek to offer a progressive alternative to the welfare law. We partnered with Women on Welfare who are connected to community-based organizations all across this country who saw political education as a part of their work. And we were in genuine partnership. They shared their stories, their experience, their wisdom. We shared what we knew about, from our vantage point about the law and policy and dominant narratives. And together we were better. We were able to make sense of what was and what should be. It was truly a transformational experience for everyone involved. Not only did we come up with better solutions, but we built relationship and community and collective power as we went. And that's where the great possibility comes in. In order to transform society, we need to build power. And our power is our people. When we center the most marginalized, we see that the problems are interconnected and the solutions need to be too. That will change how we see our work and who we partner with. It will move us from a field that is defined by the problem of sexual violence to become a movement for liberation, defined by a vision of a world that is grounded in the values of love, care, and mutuality and regeneration. And once we see that as our purpose, we'll find that we are no longer alone. We're not an isolated field, but part of a much bigger, broader force for social justice. We're connected to other movements who are working toward a radical revolution in values too. And then we can build a world where no mother endures rape to keep her children safe. And our great-grandchildren will not even believe it was possible that we allowed this world to exist for that.